Welcome to Getting Your Edge, How to Downsize Your Life, the podcast that helps you with financial, practical, and emotional sides of moving to the next chapter of your life, whether that's downsizing, upsizing, or whatever. Let's dive in with our episode guest today. We have Elizabeth Zelinka Parsons. She's a trailblazer in retirement transition space and an author of the book Encore, a high achiever's guide to thriving in retirement. She's a seasoned lawyer and a consultant with Zelinka Parsons and the co-founder of Encore. She advises professionals on navigating life's pivotal transitions. Elizabeth's expertise is deeply rooted in her personal journey from a high-powered legal career to redefining her own personal purpose, and fulfillment in a new chapter. Welcome, Elizabeth Zelinka Parsons.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Let's start off with a little background. Elizabeth, tell us about yourself, your career in high-powered law, and writing a book and becoming a retirement transition expert.
Sure. Be happy to share that. I have always been one of those high achiever types. When I think back to the very beginning, I was the little kid that was always wanting to get straight A's. I was very acclimated to this idea of climbing whatever ladder you stuck in front of me. Didn't always ask if I wanted to even be on the ladder. I just climbed. And I found myself ultimately after college, I was working full time. I went to law school at night at Georgetown. I ended up landing a job at a very prestigious Wall Street law firm. And all of that felt and was an exciting accomplishment. And it took an incredible amount of work. But I was so used to that redlining and working hard that I slotted straight into law firm life in Washington, D.C. and was, before I knew it, working 80 hours a week nonstop without questioning any of it. And after about 10 years of that, I also was at a stage of life where I started a family. And one day I realized I've got two small kids and I'm paying a lot of other people to live my life for me so I can go to work and make money so I can pay a lot of other people to live my life for me. I made the difficult decision to leave my career, leave DC, and reinvent myself so that I could be a more present parent. I make no judgment about anybody else who's decided to blend those two challenges together because I admire it. I just could not find the right balance. And so the funny thing about that decision is that everyone thought I'd lost my mind with, what are you doing? The explanation I gave was, oh, no, it's fine. I'm just front ending my retirement. I'm just going to take 5 or 10 years from that chapter I'm going to call retirement and live it now. And then I'll make more money later. I need the time now. I've got enough money to get me by and find my feet, and I'll be fine. Off I go to Tucson. And once the euphoria of the move wore off, I suddenly realized that I had completely lost my identity. I had completely lost my sense of how to live life. My life structure made no sense to me. I was a terrible relaxer. I could not introduce myself without making reference to what I used to do for a living because I had no idea who I actually was without that career as a defining point. I really was not prepared for the lack of mental stimulation. I loved being a mom, but that was just using a very small part of who I was. There were many blind spots associated with that decision, and it was a difficult thing for me to work my way through. It was several years really soul searching and reading and learning and trying to understand these things about identity and what makes a well-lived life and what is it to thrive and all of those things that I'd never stopped to ask myself before I could start recomposing life with some intention and with a thought to what a designed life would look like. Eventually, I did do that. And as you can see, I managed to really reshape a professional life around that work. And I've been doing it 15 years, worked with hundreds and hundreds of people who later in life typically found themselves at that same inflection point, struggling to find their feet. Ultimately, I wrote the book because as I would mention what I did professionally to people, they would invariably say to me, I know 10 people who need to talk to you. It struck me, my goodness, this is a veritable epidemic out there. I thought I've learned a lot, and I think I could really help give people a framework for why it's hard and what some of the tactics and strategies are you can use to navigate it and create something spectacular next. So that's a little bit of a long answer, but hopefully enough truncated story to give you the high points.
I find that fascinating and oddly enough, almost identical to my daughter's. She
Really?
went to William and Mary Law School. She worked in DC for a while and then went as an AUSA and retired about a year ago because she has 3 children.
Yeah,
And so now
exactly.
she's trying to decide what she's going to do with the rest of her life. It's amazing. Can you give us a personal story or an experience from your career that shaped your views on this? Did you have any when you walked out the door on transitions, or did you just walk out the door and then suddenly go, now what do I do?
It's a really good question. I did it thoughtfully. I really did think about this for a year at least. And it was very bittersweet because I did love what I did professionally, but it was just impossible for me to show up correctly in both places. I couldn't see how to fit it all. I gave the firm 4 months. I definitely didn't just bounce out the door. It was very important to me that I tie that up correctly and put things to bed correctly. I had no intention of ever practicing law again. There's this wonderful bit of psychology I stumbled across called the end of history illusion, where you imagine that what you want now is what you're going to want forever. So, like that you've reached the most mature version of what you will ever want right this minute. That's what we continue to think our lives. So, of course, one of the blind spots I had was that somehow, like, my life would forever be defined by those current circumstances. And of course, that makes no sense when you analyze it. 15 years later, my kids are like, could you find something else to do besides be our mother, please? And so I ultimately did recharge my career. I do legal works to this day. I have a very different practice in Tucson. It's wonderful alongside this other professional life. So I think what I couldn't appreciate is what a rich mosaic of opportunities I could create for myself going forward. I'd been on such a one track lifestyle: school, law school, legal career. You have this misunderstanding that everything the rest of your life is going to be monolithic instead of a lovely array of different complementary things. That was a discovery I made. And it's been probably the richest discovery of all. I had no idea that I should even imagine it, if that makes sense.
Wow.
That's just wonderful.
Prior to retirement, what steps should a person who's getting ready to prepare themselves for their next journey, what are you suggesting they do?
I would say there were two big picture aspects to it. I think to some degree, we all become very identified with what we are doing professionally. We put a lot of our time, energy, and skills into that. And then we as humans like to belong to things. And so we end up feeling part of the career, profession, employer, firm, whatever it may be. And so there is an identity bridging that has to happen. I mention that to people and everyone nods. Yes, I see what you mean. I think I do identify in some way with what I've been doing. So that's a big picture project. And I'll get into the details of how you could think about it. The second is this restructuring. For most of us, the career during those years defines how we live. It is the big thing around which the rest of our life has to work. We fit in our social lives. We fit in our family time. We fit in, if we're lucky, hobbies. But work is that non-negotiable part. When you just pluck that out of the middle of the scaffolding, everything goes, there's no organized result. So I always say to people, you want to think about your life structure before you pull the career right out of the middle of it. Wake up on Monday morning when you no longer work and go, now what? That's not a great place from which to design an empowered life. With the identity bridging, I always remind people that we as humans are very motivated by creating communion, feeling a sense of cohesion, having routines, and a sense of agency. Work gives us all three of those things. And you've got to recognize that you need those in your life in the new chapter. So figuring out a
Can
way.
So can you go over just a little bit again, that idea of identity? What did you call it? Identity
Bridging. Yeah.
bridging. I love that term.
Yeah, because it is a process. But when people say to me, how do you do it? I talk about there were three sort of motivational properties that our identity is tied to, and the sense of communion, a sense of agency, and a sense of cohesion. Communion being the people we feel we belong with, agency being that sense that we can make things happen in the world. Cohesion is the routines and patterns we live. It turns out we need that to feel good. Work is almost always a huge provider of at least part of those things. So one way to think about bridging identity is to think intentionally about where will I get my communion? How will I create my agency? And what's cohesion look like in this new world I'm going to live in? What are the new patterns and routines? What does a great day look like? When do I want to be mentally sharp? When do I like to be physically active? When do I like to be social? Really think about creating a structure for your day, because you're now going to create that. Work doesn't give it to you anymore. When I work with people, we explore those questions, and beginning to create answers begins to give them the content for designing what they're going to be living. And it gives people such a sense of comfort to have some structure around. It's all iterative, but it's like, where do you start? And this gives you somewhere to start. And all the better, to Dennis's question, if you can start it before you retire, because you're going to have a great pathway starting to build, so that when you actually walk out the door, you've got a lot of this already working for you.
Did you go through that process yourself, or was it haphazard, a mystery that was discovered?
Oh, it was discovered. I was wandering around lost. I literally remember asking myself, what has happened to me? I used to be this person who could make stuff happen, and I was confident. I thought it was just going to be like this awesome mix of yoga and finger painting with a little wine and entrepreneurship. No, I ended up utterly lost and felt so guilty, because as much as I adored being a mom, it wasn't using all of me. I was unable to understand how I could deploy myself, because I had been doing these $1 billion finance deals. And where am I going to do that in Tucson? I couldn't figure out how I could be relevant or useful anywhere. What I finally did was get so desperate that I had to start self-educating. I had to start reading books I never would have read. I was like, how am I going to figure this out? I cannot stay this way. I took a very intentional approach to it. It's like I went into problem solving mode, which for me is educate myself, take a zillion notes, and look for the patterns. And then what can I get into action on? And that's literally how it all started.
Mm.
Do you recommend that if people are thinking about retiring, regardless of what someone's career is, removing it from the center of their life? There's a withdrawal. I'm a kind of a jack of all trades. So I have a few things I've been through. Every single time, it's like there's a piece missing until it's not. Would you recommend people begin journaling to outline what their day currently looks like, how much time is spent here, and then remove that? Sounds like you've put the roadmap together so that other people don't have to. We're definitely going to write your book on
Yeah.
our podcast.
Sure. Yeah, there's definitely a great framework in there to get that kind of thinking going. And I think you're right. I also think when you leave something that's been important to you and say goodbye to it, no one ever uses this term, but there's a little bit of grieving, even if it's exactly right. I made the choice to leave. I was aware that I could not sustain my life the way it was structured. And I was like, goodbye, old friend. But it made me sad. I used to belong there, and these people have been my colleagues and friends, and I know how life works there. So saying goodbye to all that's sad. But I think nobody ever talks about it with retirement because everyone around you is like popping the champagne cork. And the person retiring's like,
Yeah, the people
right,
who aren't retiring are saying, "Hey,
exactly.
celebrate."
And
And
like, I think there's some of that. And then the idea that you're taking this enormous piece of time and energy, right? And saying, okay, I used to be working from 8 to 6 every day. Now, what do I do during those hours? It is a reallocation of attention and energy to new things. One of the things I work with people on is to really divide their life into the areas that matter to them. I have a framework for this in the book. For example, most people would say, I wish I had more time to devote to my health. I would be out walking more or doing this or that exercise, or I'd be with these groups of people or eating better, whatever it is. That stuff takes time. It takes energy. It takes planning. And suddenly the opportunity's there to allocate more time to that. Similarly, relationships are a huge one. People are always saying, I just don't have enough time to see my friends or even my close family, my peripheral family, my neighbors. Let's think about what now is possible. It's the act of actually planning and allocating time to areas in life that you care about and that you want to enrich and you want to make more robust. And it's really interesting as people start to do that, they can see, wait a minute, I'm not going to be bored. I'm going to be thriving. I'm going to be really building these parts of my life out in an intentional way. We spend time looking at what are the new opportunities for engagement and purpose and meaning. What are the things you have never gotten to do that you want to do? We get into that, and that's fun. I see this as a grand opportunity, much more like a graduation into more. The minute you put that frame around it, you're like, whoa, the world's my oyster.
And what happens with those people who don't make this connection, that they have all this extra time, but gosh, what do I do?
Yeah, not necessarily knowing any of these people firsthand, because I like to say my clients tend to thrive pretty successfully just because they put the work in. But I think the risks are, and I think we've all seen these examples, that people really do decline. We all need to be challenged. We all need to be pulled forward into more. And I think we wither as human beings when we think a life of pure leisure is going to be enough. I think there's a huge risk of isolation, a risk of a loss of confidence. That's very much what happened to me temporarily because I didn't feel intentional about what I was doing with my life. I felt lost. And so that aimlessness and that sense of I don't have a direction, it eats away at you to the point where you feel embarrassed, like you're the only one who got this wrong somehow. I've heard that a lot from my clients. They think they're the only ones feeling squeamish about this. I'm like, oh no, everybody feels squeamish about this. And suddenly it's like a relief to realize, oh, it's so normal for
Wow.
this inflection point to be this challenging because it's so comprehensive. So I just think if you take the leap, I'm sure there are a percentage of people who figure it out and maybe they even enjoy base jumping out of life. They find that exhilarating. Most of my clients find it terrifying and scary enough that they would say they are struggling to access this same agency that they had when they were full flight in their careers.
I know my uncle was a perfect example of what you were talking about. He worked for the city of Phoenix. As he got closer to retirement, that's all he could talk about. He was a very vivacious, active man. He retired and we had moved up here, so I didn't see him for about a year. He showed up here with my aunt and he had aged a decade.
It's
And
amazing.
he had to go up and take a nap and just sat around. I looked at that and I said, I don't ever
Yep.
want to be that, but I've never thought about how you combat that. I am just thrilled to be hearing what you have to say because I think it's really difficult, and especially the older you get. We have clients who retired and sat down in the recliner and didn't get up again. And suddenly you're having to help them move to a senior care facility and it's not fun. It's not pretty. It's not a good way, in my opinion. Maybe some people like that. I don't.
No, I agree. To me, we're here to live, and life is about purpose and challenge and contribution. Of course, we all enjoy some leisure mixed in there, but I don't think leisure has a lot of meaning if it's not intention with effort of some kind.
Right.
It can be effort we love, but effort nonetheless. I've never known a human to be thriving in a life of pure leisure. It's not what we're built for. So I think we've been sold a bill of goods in a way, not intentionally, but just all the messaging around retirement is, oh, once you have enough money, you're set. Like, you don't need to figure anything else out because you're just going to be playing tennis and golfing and on some sailboat somewhere. And oh, that is a complete bill of goods.
Right.
That is not what makes life meaningful. And you can ask anybody after about 2 or 3 months of that, it's like, this cannot continue. Or they sit in front of the TV all day and it's just the beginning of the end, literal.
Now, as you're speaking, I'm also envisioning another area where personally I had to go through this when my children grew up and left. I had a business and I had that whole business of raising my children, and suddenly they're gone. That was a whole nother withdrawal that, had I thought about it in advance, maybe I could have prepared better to face it, other than just that grieving and emptiness I'm sure quite a few of us go through.
Absolutely. I love that you raised that because I actually address it in my book as its own version of a retirement because we're still parents and moms. I had 4 all move on to their next chapters. And of course, they're still my kids and we're in touch. But my goodness, my role changed dramatically. And it is never something anybody really spends a lot of time thinking about, but it's a massive change. And it's often, interestingly, happening in and around the same time that some of my clients are retiring. They're both retiring from huge careers and also beginning the process of launching their children. It's a double whammy. Middle adulthood was all about go and kids this and kids that, and I barely look up to see what time it is half the time.
So, what kinds of mistakes have you noticed that retirees have done that leads to an unfulfilling transition in retired life?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say it has to do with mindsets and not embracing new mindsets from the ones you probably relied on as a full-time professional. For example, I talk a lot about this in my book, but also with my clients. You have got to become a creator, not a reactor. Those 2 words have the identical letters in them. But reactor is you get up, you go to work, open your computer, and there's a stream of stuff coming at you to deal with. And that is the way it is. You react all day to the agenda of work. If you expect life to continue to stream an agenda at you after you retire, you are going to be bored and confused because you're going to just sit there and look for email. There's nothing coming. You've got to create the content of your life. The minute people bring that one mindset into focus, you can see the shift. It's, oh, you're right. I'm the one who's going to design my daily agenda. I'm the one who's going to plan my week. How juicy and fun is that? But it's not juicy and fun if you're expecting to react to things all day. So that's one. Another one is to need to be certain about outcomes. In working life, we are paid to get things right. And there's a mindset around, I need to analyze things. I need to be careful. I can't take wild experiments. I need to know how we're going to get this done. But when you are exploring new pathways, it is way better to bring an experimental mindset forward. Try things. And it's fine if something doesn't go the way you think it will. It's just a data point. In fact, experiments don't succeed or fail. They just give us data. So I remind people, don't analyze your ideas to death. Don't criticize them to death. If you have a sparky thought about maybe I'll write a book or start a podcast, why not? What do you have to lose? Go give it a try, experiment, And don't burden the idea with the need for it to succeed. You're not 23 anymore, and this isn't like a make it or break it moment. You can just try it and have fun. And I think when people embrace that mindset, it becomes a fun adventure instead of this high risk, oh my gosh, it's going to be mortifying if this doesn't work out the way I think it is. It's hard to set that work mindset down where it did matter a lot to get things right. Those are a couple of areas that I would say are pretty easy pitfalls for people to step into if they're not getting out in front of those mindsets and trying to build that new muscle and think of things differently.
Do you
I can
find that
think of
people
things that
are
were,
insecure with that idea of taking the risk of stepping outside of their comfort zone?
Oh, absolutely. It's always uncomfortable. Comfort zone is a big term I use in my book too. I mean, we love our comfort zones, so they're comfy. Usually, by the time someone's leaving a career, they have a huge sense of mastery over their role. They know what they're doing. So when you have to step into a world where you're a student again, or you're going to not be good at something for a little while, it's not that fun, especially if you're a person who enjoys feeling confident, as many of my clients are. So I remind them, don't judge yourself as if somebody wants to learn to play the piano, don't judge yourself as a pianist in the early days. Judge yourself as a student of the piano. Inhabit that role and be the best darn student you can be. Don't worry so much about whether you're good yet. That will come. It is really interesting how hard it is to get comfortable being uncomfortable with not being competent yet at something you're trying to do.
I think being competent in front of an audience is extremely important to many people. And when you're retired, all the risk taking that you do doesn't have the same magnitude or audience that it did within the job. You could be fired. I could
Right.
be embarrassed. I could be demoted. In this case, a few people might know, but not a whole company.
Exactly. I asked that literal question. What is the cost of failure? What is the cost of this not working out? And it's funny because they go, nothing. Who cares? I say the real way to look at this is that you're a role model for the people watching you. Someday somebody's going to talk about how you were in retirement. And those younger people, whoever they are in your life, you're setting an example. You're either going to be the example of the person that went out and did even more, went after cool opportunities, started new things, made new friends, just lived it up to the last minute, or you're going to be that person. It's, I guess he just sat in his armchair and watched TV until he died. You think of it that way and it's, oh my gosh, no. But we are all setting those examples, whether we're thinking of it that way or not.
Do you think if somebody's retiring at, say, 55 or 60, is there a difference between somebody who's retiring at 80 or 85?
I think so, mainly around just the stage of life and the level of energy that somebody's got. Many of my clients are retiring around 55. I frequently work with people at organizations where that age is the earliest they can vest into some sort of benefit. And they've worked hard and they've got more than enough money. So it just makes sense to go ahead and retire. But boy, it's, I'm older than 55. It's young. So
Yeah.
they're not necessarily, they're clear that they can't just do nothing. And so they are very interested in defining for themselves what is going to be a spectacular next chapter. And what we talk about usually at that age is, look, if you were going to live a fantastic decade, put yourself at 65, you're looking back. What's happened? What have you done? What are the things that you've been involved in? Where did you make contributions? Is there a big, audacious goal that you still have that you haven't yet been able to pursue? And it's very interesting what comes out of those questions because there's a lot of gas left in the tank and a lot of wisdom accrued. I always encourage people to go for it. Go for more than you think you can even necessarily achieve. And you're never going to regret doing that. At 85, I would say, I don't work with a lot of people at that age, but I would say, knowing the people around that age that I do know who are still very engaged, are much more interested in the depth of relationships in their lives. Even at 55, relationships are always an awesome place to invest. It is never going to be a mistake to invest in relationships. And I would talk about relationship portfolios, that we all talk about our money portfolio, but what's your relationship portfolio? Is it rich with friends? Is it rich with family and neighbors and community? The more of that you can create, the happier you will be at 85, is what I've observed.
So many people, that's such a hard thing right now for people, especially younger people.
Yeah.
They don't have any portfolios of relationships and they're very afraid to get involved with other people. And it's sad.
Yes.
Someone told me a long time ago, and I've kept this with me, what other people think of me is none of my business.
Quotes.
I love that. And
That's
so
brilliant.
I can go out and do just about anything I want because I don't care what you think of me. What does it matter?
Exactly. I think that's such a lovely example to set for others because it matters what we think of us. And at the end of the day, that's who we really have to answer to.
You've got to look in the mirror and did you accomplish what you wanted to accomplish? Are you happy with what you run into people that are being forced into retirement?
Yeah.
My husband was in the wine industry for 35 years, from a smaller distributor to a national to an international. And they just got bigger and bigger until they're now getting smaller and smaller. And the older he got, the harder it was to make a transition into another corporation, to the point where he finally went into real estate with me. It became too demoralizing. I wonder, do you run into people like that?
Absolutely. It's very common in a number of industries now for the general culture to be leaning younger. And so as much as I think of the legal industry 20 or 30 years ago, the idea of retiring at 55 would have seemed like utter madness. Now it's really common and often not optional. There can be extra negative emotion to process when you feel forced into something like that, when you are still very productive, contributive, and still enjoying it. So we do occasionally work with people coping with feeling rejected by the context they have committed their lives to. There's extra process there. I always remind people the way things end often colors the way we see an entire experience. Think about a marriage. Somebody can have a 20-year marriage or 20 years of great marriage, 5 years of really bad, terrible divorce, and the whole thing is just yuck. And so I remind people, look, don't let the way this ends color the whole thing. You've had a spectacular career. You need to drive this narrative. You need to frame it for yourself in the best and most productive way you can. Who cares what the choice or the impetus was? At this moment in time, you are going to choose to leave positively, powerfully, on top, stepping into the future. That's the way you want to leave this thing. And it just makes sense. But it's very easy to fall into the trap of being angry and then letting it embitter you toward what was really a pretty awesome career. I find I always try to help people avoid that because I feel like it's a shame. It's a sadness to me that just this small period of time could color the whole thing.
Now, you're in Tucson, but do you have people coming to you from all over the country?
Yes.
Do you deal individually with them? Do you have Zoom meetings? How do you run your business beyond the book?
So we do a variety of different programming. Our longest standing and most premium work is 2 days with one person going very deep into their circumstance and helping them create a plan for their future. We continue working with them as they implement that, sometimes over a year or two. That's a very high touch. Typically, those people come and work with us in Tucson. We've worked with people all over the world. Sometimes we'll meet people from Asia, in Hawaii, or we'll meet people who work in European companies in Europe. But for the most part, people will come to Tucson, or when we were in Santa Fe, people came to Santa Fe to work with us. We also are now doing group programming quarterly. We always work in resort environments. And a person's got to be comfortable coming to a group session. It's a sort of 2.5 day seminar workshop situation. What I enjoy about those, and I think people like, is that they're going through this with a cohort. So they can really build a community of people going through something similar. It's interesting to see how those relationships end up being supportive across this whole transition. And then, yes, we also have Zoom-based programs for people that say, I'd love to engage in this deeply. That's usually done over a full day or split into two, depending on the client's preference. It's very similar material, just virtual and more convenient for people. Sometimes we're happy to accommodate it. I love being in a room with someone, but sometimes that's just not very convenient. We have tried to create versions of this work over the years that can accommodate people's different needs, different tolerances for expense and those kinds of things.
You find that there are cultural differences or even gender differences in the expectations or thoughts about what retirement is?
It was such a good question. 5 or 6 years ago, we had not worked much with anybody internationally. And I was very curious about that myself, that very question, like, is all this going to translate culturally? And what is interesting, because what we're really dealing with most fundamentally is the human side of this, it fully translates. Some of the more practical opportunities and methods of implementing ideas are obviously shaped more by their local regions and relationships. But that's fine, because what we're really there to do is help people get out of their own heads what it is they really want for themselves. We facilitate this work with them. Everything we do comes from them, and then we help them shape it into action and support their actions. I literally had that very question, but have fully convinced myself after many experiences that we humans are all grappling with the same stuff.
Hmm.
What's the
Yeah.
youngest person that's come to you to help plan this out?
I think the youngest person we have worked with was, occasionally it's people who sell companies, and they're slightly different people, right, than like a long-term 4-decade professional, but they're just as intense in their commitment to what they've just done. And they've been working toward this exit, and now they've sold.
Yeah.
There was somebody in their 40s, who might have been late 30s, that we helped with that transition and just thinking about, what does this next year look like? Is it just a sabbatical where you can reflect on what you want to do next, and then some ideas and pathways for what that might be? Because he obviously wanted but in the professional context, we've worked with people as early as 50 who knew they were going to leave at 55, being long-term planners, wanted to get way out in front of this so that by the time 55 came, they had been building into this, new future. For some, that would be way too far out. They wouldn't be able to really get serious about it. But there are people who want to be 4 or 5 years ahead of it. Most people are comfortable 18 months to a year out. That's the most common.
In your
I'm really impressed that you did this. You did all the footwork for people. If someone just buys your book, what can they expect? Is there a workbook or anything that goes along with that?
There is not yet a workbook. I've been asked that several times and seriously thinking about working on that. It's more a framework divided into 4 parts. The first section is an exploration of, why is retirement so challenging? What are the psychological challenges about it? What did we all get told about it that's off? Then I talk about the section on identity bridging, a section on how to restructure life and how to think about that, and the section on getting into action. What does it mean to do this with the people in your life? What are the implications for marriage and family? And then how do you get into action and stay in action and enjoy this thing? It's a very structured book. And the feedback I've gotten is that it's helpful. There are plenty of prompts throughout the book to give a person some self-facilitation guidance. Many people who've read the book has, of course, reached out and said, no, I just want to work with you guys because I can see I need this. It was helpful to understand all the stuff, but I need more hands-on help.
Within your book, you emphasize the importance of rebuilding connections and purpose. in your retirement. Can you explain what that means and what actions people can do to achieve this?
For the purpose side, one of the discussions we typically have with people is that for many of our clients, they're summiting the peak of middle adulthood. They've got their families raised, they've had this smashing career, they've built the financial security they've been working for. But when you think about what purpose has been, in many ways it's fulfilled. It's well done. Take a moment and let's have a round of applause because you did it. When you started off in your 20s, this is what you were trying to do. And that purpose has fueled you. So now the question is, what is your purpose? What's going to fuel your life now? Sometimes people have an unlived life, something they didn't do yet that they wanted to do. I can share a story about a great example in my book if you want, but one idea is that there's this thing you never got to do because you were too busy trying to be the responsible adult. And you did that really well. But is there that thing? Or are you now at a place where the financial resources you have are going to unlock some sort of fresh purpose? Is there a philanthropic road you want to go down? Is there a cause that you want to get involved in and help support? Do you want to work with young people and help them find their way? What are the things that are going to give your life meaning? It's a hard question. But what I think is true for most of our clients is that they've checked the box on one of the major life purposes they had. And not that it won't continue in some way. We all still are there for our families and things, but it's not the same level of fuel. In the process of redefining purpose, I remind people that these new pathways of purpose are going to provide all kinds of rich opportunities to create relationships with human beings that are going to be meaningful in your life in a new way. One of the big complaints about this stage of life is, where do I meet people? How do we meet people? We could meet people when we were raising our kids. I met people at work. Well, you've got to move down these new pathways and you're going to find the people who have these shared interests, these shared passions. That's where you find them. So to me, they go together. One feeds the other. In the exploration of these new pathways, new people pop up with new ideas, new inspiration, and they take you off in fun directions you would have never thought of on your own. So I see them as a very synergistic set of goals.
From your experience as a dedicated professional to your business and now your law work, and then now as a consultant, what advice would you give to somebody who's contemplating retirement?
I think what I would primarily say to them is, as they contemplate it, are they excited? Are they nervous? Are they worried? Assuming they need advice and therefore they're perhaps worried, I would say, first of all, you are not alone. And everybody feels this way. Go find people who've either been through this already, find role models who are living a chapter after a big career that you admire, that you think is interesting and fun. Get their advice, get with them, and get with people. Use this as an excuse to get out there and start getting advice and finding, who else should I be talking to? Explore, use it as an excuse to do that. You almost cannot go wrong if you do that. And if I were just going to give people one to-do item, it would be that. Get out there. You
Found that
talk.
people love to give advice.
Yeah, they do.
You reach out and I just wanted to pick your brain, man. They're right there.
Absolutely. And I always tell them, get those meetings set up with the people you know, and they're going to love to give you advice. And the next question is, who else should I talk to? Boom. There you go. You've got a warm introduction to somebody who's probably got something relevant to say. And you do that a few times and you're off and running and see magic come out of that.
Right.
Yeah.
Elizabeth, you're a energetic, effervescence, and you like people, I can tell. What
Yeah.
about the person who's introverted?
All the time. Yes, very commonly, in fact, more introverts than extroverts for sure. And it's interesting because I think a lot of more introverted people imagine that they aren't going to be good at what I just described.
Mm.
And what I remind them of is you just need your alone time. You need a lot more alone time to recharge yourself than maybe somebody who's more extroverted. So just make sure you have that. You don't have to pack your days with this stuff. Even if you were to say, I'm going to make a commitment to set up 2 encounters a week with somebody. That's enough. There's no magic number, but don't let the story that you're an introvert translate into, I can't do this, because that's not true. I've seen many people who are absolute flag flying introverts do this very successfully. It's all about right sizing it and making sure you are protecting the time you need as an introverted person to recharge your batteries the way you like to, which is probably on your own. Nothing wrong with that. That's different than isolation. Solitude is lovely if it's being chosen. Yeah.
Do you have any last words of wisdom to share on this, Elizabeth? Anything we haven't covered?
I guess my last comment is really to think about this. Why shouldn't this be the most spectacular? Why shouldn't this be the most spectacular chapter of your life? A lot of people start to imagine it's the beginning of the end. And I'm like, this is the beginning of the best thing you're ever going to live. Why wouldn't it be? You've got the wisdom of experience, some financial security, control over your time. You have relationships, you know how the world works, who you are, what you're good at. Why wouldn't you be able to put that together and create something truly spectacular? That's a fun idea. I would just leave everybody with that thought that don't discount how wonderfully rich this can be just because we're all stuck with that bad word retirement.
Ultimately, it seems it's self-empowerment.
Yes.
Take control of your life.
Yep.
Choose the path, and it might be a windy path.
Yep.
Thank you so much for joining us on this podcast. You're an incredible resource for people who have retired, are close to retiring, or contemplating the 5-year plan. If our listeners or YouTube viewers wanted more information about you, your consulting business, your book, how would they contact you?
Sure. It's very easy to find me on LinkedIn and all of my various websites. You can also go to highachieverretirement.com and that'll take you to various doorways, so websites, books, and programs. Those are probably the 2 best ways. And the book is available everywhere books are sold.
Definitely put a
Yes.
link to the book and to your website on our podcast and YouTube channel.
Thank you. This has been a really fun conversation. It's been lovely to meet you both.
What is the website?
highachieverretirement.com.
Yes.
That'll get people to all the right places.
That's it for this episode of Getting Your Edge, How to Downsize Your Life. We hope today's conversation has given you clarity and encouragement as you plan your next chapter. If you're thinking about downsizing, don't go it alone. The Edge Group team, Judy and I and Jim, we're here to help you. We are the downsizing experts, and we have experience in home, transitioning to a smaller home, RV, retirement community, wherever your journey leads you. Connect us through our website, edgegroupteam.com, and get started on your path towards downsizing. We look forward to helping you in the next step. Bye, everyone. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Bye.
Really appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth.
Take care.